Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy. So, we talk a lot about food here on Morning Newsbeat, and not just because a sizable portion of the Morning Newsbeat audience is in the food business. Now, we talk about food a lot here on Morning Newsbeat because it's something people can get passionate about. It's certainly something I'm passionate about. Listen, I think talking about things like GMOs in food is really, really important. But I'm not sure it's any more important than talking about what makes an In-N-Out burger better than a McDonald's burger, or why a great Oregon Pinot Noir is one of the greatest things on the planet, or why food stores actually need to be in the food business as opposed to just stocking boxes and bags and cartons and jars on shelves and selling them. I think all those things are equally important in my mind in a lot of ways. Now, these subjects can be contentious depending on who you're talking to. If you're talking to somebody who eats to live, not so much. But if you're talking to somebody like me who lives to eat, these are subjects about which we all can get passionate. We can get passionate about, styles of barbecue. We can get passionate about things like the great restaurants of New Orleans. We can get passionate about what makes bread pudding such a wonderful dessert and why it's different almost every place you have it. And I know I can get passionate about why shrimp and lobster risotto is one of the most elegant and simple dishes one could ever eat. These are things we can get excited about. But to be honest, one thing I don't really talk about and don't really think about a lot is the whole notion of agriculture. And in part is I'm just not a farm guy. I'm not sure I've ever been on a farm. I'm not sure I've ever been on a ranch. I know they're important. I know they exist. I know a little bit about them from things I've read or seen in the movies, but I really don't know very much at all. I was fascinated recently when a good friend of mine, one of my favorite people in the industry, told me that she had compiled a list of things she wanted to do before her birthday, and one of those things was to actually milk an actual cow on an actual farm. I wish her all the luck in the world. It is not a passion I would share. But, that said, I was kind of interested. I was looking at this TED Talk the other day. It's a recent TED Talk by a fellow named Caleb Harper, who is, and I want to make sure I get this right, the director of the Open Agriculture Initiative at the MIT Media Lab. And basically, he was talking about the farms of the future and how they're all going to be networked by computer as the agriculture business changes to feed a growing planet, and a planet that needs more and more food. And basically what he was talking about is why it's critically important to have electrical engineers and mechanical engineers and economists and plant scientists and computer scientists and yes, even farmers, to have them all involved in the agriculture business, because it's going to be much more complicated in the future if we're going to feed the planet. They're going to network technology in ways I never even thought about, much less envisioned. I mean, for me, I thought we were going to go right from farms to the replicators on Star Trek, but apparently there's a lot of steps in between. Now, listen, I have some experience with the idea of future farming looking different than traditional farming. I can remember many, many years ago going to a Fiesta Mart down in Texas, and they had built an actual hydroponic farm. It's an enormous, like 15, 20-foot wall that overlooked a produce department of a store. And it was fascinating. It was like steps of produce, and it was really interesting. It was theatrical. It was very effective in talking about the sourcing of food. It wasn't economically sustainable, if I recall correctly, and so eventually they had to close it down. But what a really interesting idea to talk to people about how food has to be sourced differently. I have a cousin who actually has in her own thing a thing called the Grove ecosystem, which was also developed from some people from MIT. And basically it's a little installation where she's growing food they actually eat in their house. And this thing apparently is getting a little bit of traction. It was funded for hundreds of thousands of dollars on Kickstarter. So yeah, the food infrastructure is changing in little bits and pieces, but apparently, at least according to Harper, it's got to change in major ways. Now, listen, this is all a little bit foreign to me, but I really learned something from Harper's talk. So basically what I'm doing here on FaceTime this morning is I'm going to include a link that will allow you to watch his talk. It's not that long, but it's amazingly instructive. I learned a lot. I hope you'll learn something too. And here's one particular statistic that I think to pay attention to. One of the things Harper says is that only 2% of the U.S. population is involved in farming. And when he talks about expanding the farming infrastructure, basically what he says is this, is when did an answer to anything come from just 2% of any population? Worth thinking about. That's what's on my mind this Thursday morning, and as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.